Thank you for joining. I would like to introduce Joe Gura. He is the Director of Global Partner Enablement and Customer Events at Microsoft, and he is here to talk about growing roles and responsibilities in digital marketing. And he also teaches within the Marketing Communications online programs. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, Stephanie, thank you for that introduction. Great to see all of you today here at lunchtime. I'm coming to you today from Toronto. I am usually based in a city that has a different kind of Space Needle on this side behind me. I'm usually out of Seattle, but since I'm over here with you guys on the East Coast today, I thought it'd be just much better to do this from here. So it's a great opportunity to come talk to you. I'm super delighted to be here. Purpose of what we'll be doing today, I just wanted to spend some time to talk about, in our so much of what we do here in the WVU program, and the reason I came to it as a student here in 2013 when I was a student was I wanted to just drive my career further. I wanted the right kind of growth, not just growth for growth's sake, and grow into roles that I knew I'd be happy and effective and impactful in. And so that being said, Stephanie and I saw something in newsletter, Stephanie and I were talking, and I'm like, I feel like it might be helpful because there's such an alphabet soup of roles and things out there. And how do we know who works with who and what works with what? And nobody really writes this down anywhere, or really tells anybody. And so I thought I'd share that a bit with you today in this talk conversation, but I'm also here to help take any questions you have for me. And so we have a really interactive time here. So this will not be, as we say, PowerPoint karaoke. It'll just be a couple of slides, a couple of backgrounds, and then we'll go from there. Please be advised, I'm joining you from a hotel today. I'm hoping the internet connection bears out with me. I've closed enough applications to make this all awesome, but should something fall offline and I got to drop and come back, that's what's happening there. And I'll try to keep an eye on the questions in the question window as well while we work together on this. Well, so, and now my name finally revealed on. So to give you some background about me, I have a bit of some odd background, and so as you can obviously tell by my very strong accent, I was born in England, and grew up in Northern California. So eventually moving on to Washington State, where I live today, and I'll explain the stars on the screen in a second. And of course, I have a very close affinity with West Virginia from my time there as part of this program, not just as a student, but as an instructor. Further about my background is, I was big into sports, and you'll see kind of a left to right here about kind of what are the principles and what are the things that have guided me, right? I was big into sports when I was younger. I played football when I was younger. I still enjoy games. I still enjoy sports, but I decided to not enjoy it as a profession, and I'll share more about that in a minute. I also enjoyed television. I enjoyed the technology side of television. I was in television production for a long time. And then I eventually moved into technology itself and working on marketing technology products, which is what I've done with the bulk of my career as it's all worked out. I'm approaching my 15th year at Microsoft. And so that's kind of been a bit of the background of my journey. But I think if, everybody has guiding principles, and these are the things that I enjoy most. It's number one, be where the action is. Sports always meant action to me. Be where the thing is happening. When I worked in the news, I worked on elections. I worked on big sporting events. I worked on some of the biggest pieces, and I gravitated towards that. I wanted to be in those things because that's just what gave me that special kind of rush, right? And that's not for everybody, but that was for me. Telling a story. I love being able to tell a story through data, through numbers, just through words. Like, what are the different ways we can get it across to the different mediums, whether it's podcasting, broadcasting, written word. I love all that. So if I can do that in my work, I'm a happy guy. And then finally, never be afraid to make something better. To look at something and go, well, if it can be better, let's try it. Let's not be afraid to make a mistake. Let's not be afraid to learn something. Going back all the way to the sports side of it, I also at this age, I coached a lot of youth basketball up until recently. Now I'm more of a basketball dad, but I always would tell my teams, we don't lose, we win or we learn, right? And don't be afraid to learn, and that's okay. So that's a bit of my background, top to bottom there. You'll notice there's 2 stars on the Washington State outline there. The star on the right is for Pullman, Washington, which is actually where my career began. at Washington State University. And so I've been able to move through and have quite a few titles here. And I think that that's kind of the half the joke about being English is I kind of have more titles than the king. And not because I'm royalty, even though I did do some research during the pandemic and got really bored and found out that I was the king's 26th cousin. But I'm sure we all are 20 something cousins of somebody at some point. So top to bottom here, I think what you'll see here is that, everybody has a journey and we all get different, we all have, this is the title and this is what they call you and this is what it is. And I know we all, when we're trying to grow in our own careers, we look at the title. The title means a lot, but titles are also a bit fungible. As I looked through the top to bottom of this and I was writing this out earlier, I was like, wow, these titles mean a lot of different things. This doesn't necessarily mean the work. Some cases the title was really strong, but the work was really, not as much. Director of digital media at that TV station in Seattle was cool, but it also wasn't like that strong of a role, even though it was great for my career at that time. And so, as we look at the journey we're taking, we always have to evaluate like, what's the right place to be for me? What are the right kind of roles? And then not only that, what's the right kind of work? And so I also want to point out, yes, you are reading this correctly. I was working at the age of 18 in Washington, in the television industry, as a professional, and of course got my bachelor's at the same time. And then midway through my Microsoft life, my Microsoft and technology journey, I did of course attend this program here at WVU. And of course, I'm involved in education as well as part of my undergraduate university's alumni association. So the point is, I think that a big takeaway as we look at roles and journeys is this isn't me saying this is the right journey for you. This is me saying these were the things that were important to me, to be where something was happening, to be able to be in a position to tell a good story. And when you see kind of abrupt switches, it was about getting a foot in the door. Getting a foot in the door to go work in television broadcasting was something. Getting a foot in the door to come to work at Microsoft. I'm not a lawyer, but I ended up getting a role inside the legal department and said, okay, I want to work my way up and understand how a big giant company like this works. There's a lot of action here. And so that's what I began kind of working through. So there's roles that, of course, progress into communications, marketing, this, that, the other. And it's like, what does that actually mean? What does that mean for really, is this good for my career? Is it not? And I think that one of the things we all kind of struggle with is really what is the way we look at marketing? As marketers, what's the way we look at marketing? Here's how I look at it. This is a slide I walk around with to people when I'm interviewing for a job. And I kind of make this my stick in the ground so that people know me and they know, so somebody interviewing me for a job knows me and goes, okay, that's how Joe thinks of the work. And it's the art, and the marketing is the art and the science of connecting the right message to the right person at the right time. And of course, if you want to add a few more words, it's to drive a business outcome, right? And sometimes it's not all about business. We work with nonprofits if you work with other groups, but it's to drive an action, right? And when I break it down like this really helps hiring managers understand, okay, this is who Joe is. This is what Joe's going to bring to my team. This is how Joe looks at the world. And this helps them decide if I'm a fit. And I love for them to know if I'm a fit because I want to be the right fit for whoever's hiring me. When I've hired people, I felt the same way too. I go, how do you look at this? How do you look at a problem? How do you look at the profession? Because I'm trying to understand if it fits in, if we have like the right kind of mix of ideas and mindsets. And so the thing I want more than anything when I'm working towards other roles or talking about roles or hiring for roles is I look at it like fit is the most important thing because qualification, a lot of people are qualified. There's a lot of smart people in the world and that's all of it's great. But also it's, have we demonstrated fit? And so by putting this out there, if I have somebody read this and say, I don't think that's what marketing is at all, Joe. If somebody's interviewing me for a role, I'll say, okay, well, hey, it was cool getting to know you and cool getting to know your team. It's obvious we don't see the world the same way, and that's all right. I don't say it that way, but I'm sure you understand what I mean, right? I want to fit in as well as the hiring manager wants to find a fit for their spot. And I think that that's something we often think about when we think about interviews and career progression and growth is we think, oh, I have to impress them. Sure you do, but demonstrate that, right? Demonstrate in the way you present and the way you show up. But also sometimes you can do all that and it's not, if it's just not a fit, it's just not a fit. Just like any human relationship, right? It's just the way it is. But when it's a fit, good things happen and great things happen. You're able to do really impactful things and really enjoy yourself in your career and set yourself up for success. So always think that too. There's plenty of positions I've never gotten that I always wanted. And at the end of the day, I'd always look at it and go, and I don't mean this in a sour grapes way, but I go, well, you know what? Now that I've gotten a bit older, maybe it just wasn't a fit. And if it's not a fit, that's okay. So that's been a bit of a kind of the view through my journey and the way I look at the world. I wanted to kind of pull back a bit and talk about how we actually look at the universe of marketing. And by the way, I hope in that fact that I'm sharing my screen, you guys are seeing the slide completely left to right, right? You're seeing like the green text completely, because I see like some stuff covering the screen. So if I can get a quick thing in the chat window saying you see the whole slide, that would be awesome. See it all. Thanks, Stephanie. So of course, many of us looking for roles, looking to grow in our careers, start to look at the world and go, okay, I'm looking at companies, I'm looking at agencies, and I see a lot of role titles and descriptions, and they're all very generic. And what does that really mean? So I'd like to kind of break it down for you here, because there's some very important distinctions. So what we're looking at here in the middle of the screen is the customer funnel. I realize it looks like a pizza slice, but that was the best funnel clip art I could find at the moment. And so what marketing roles really come down to is at what level of the customer journey are you engaged? Are you engaged at the top of the funnel where you're driving, awareness, where you're driving interest in the product? Or are you at mid funnel and lower where you're driving acquisition of customer or growth of customer? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And so when you see these titles, I think it's important to always think about what's the title, not just what the title is, but where are you working in the funnel and does that make you happy? Because the currency of those roles is different. So when we work in something, you see roles that say product marketing manager, brand marketing manager, social media manager, storytelling, marketing comms. These are all roles I've been part of, touched, done parts of that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But when you really think about that, these are the folks that are most concerned with defining the brand. Think of all the brand work we've done for those of you who've been grad students in this program. When you think of the brand work we do to define product truth and define benefits and define how you talk about it creatively, this is all that wonderful creative work. That's where that all happens. And it's a ton of fun. And that's a good thing. Now, where this content actually meets the customer and actually driving over the line is a section I like to that's more commonly known as go-to-market roles or GTM roles. This is campaign planning and design. Okay, I've got some wonderful product marketers. They've made some excellent content. It looks great. Now I need to make sure it hits customers. And not only does it need to hit customers, it needs to convert them. And it needs to convert them quickly. What do I do about that? Talk about marketing program managers. They design the program so that it hits right, so that we're tracking the data and the key performance indicators so it comes back right. Business program managers, business planners, sales enablement. Enablement's part of what I do, for example. So I take a lot of the content and product truth that gets delivered up, that gets built up the funnel and make sure it lands in that middle funnel to the end of the funnel so that we can drive more customers through the ecosystem more efficiently, more quickly. The green text on the right side of the screen, which is so important, is what I call currency. And so currency is every job you have and everything you work, every place you work has a currency. It has something, currency is something people care about. What do these people actually care about? What makes a difference? What moves the needle with the leaders here? What is the thing I need to make sure above all that I'm definitely delivering and landing? The currency in a product marketer's world is engagement and reach. Did we reach a large amount of people? Did we bring the right people into the tent? How are we making sure that that's happening? Are we doing social media on the right platforms to ensure that, okay, should we be LinkedIn heavier on the mix? Should we be Instagram heavier on the mix? Are we doing the right engagement so that when we actually try to drive the customer through to acquisition and cost and purchase, are we doing the right things there so that those folks have what they need? When you work in the go-to-market side of the funnel, the mid to lower part of this customer funnel, you are working in a place where revenue is big. Revenue is the big currency, right? It's literal currency, right? The dollars and cents of being a bottom line marketer and saying, because I did X, we drove revenue to Y. We brought in 24 customers, we converted 12 of them, and they bought X thousands of units, and that made us Y millions of dollars. That's the currency that really matters there. And sometimes go-to-market people can sit within a sales organization, and sometimes they sit kind of separately, or there's 100 different ways that can get sliced. But I think what's important here is understanding, as you think about roles like this and think about yourself, think, where would I be happiest? If you'd be happiest across all of it and you feel like all of it's great, that's wonderful. Maybe you can do some roles that bounce up and down, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And diversity in what you've done in your career is always a good thing. If you know in your heart of hearts that go-to-market is your place to be, and frankly, that's kind of where I've learned, where I've fallen in, that's where I have a lot of fun, because I like being able to point to the revenue. I like being able to point to firm results, like these really firm results that we see. I like the idea of also being a bit hybrid. I like the idea of writing this content and then presenting it to a customer and speaking directly to that customer, almost like a stand-up comedian delivering those jokes to a room. If those jokes hit because you're that person holding that microphone standing on that stage. And if those value propositions hit with those customers, or if you've got a sea full of blank faces. Big reason I'm in Toronto tonight is I'm actually seeing customers. I'm seeing customers a bit later tonight at an engagement, and we're going to have that conversation. And because I have that information, I'm going to be able to go back to my product marketing, friends and colleagues and say, hey, I think we need to tweak this or do that, or I see this, I see that, or this isn't as easy to work with. Let's tweak that so that we can be more scalable. And the scale is of course, another big part of go-to-market, right? You got to figure out how to do this repeatedly over and over again as easily as possible. And so that being said, I know a lot of folks work agency, right? So a lot of these roles you're seeing are kind of corporate defined. You go to work at a big corporation, that's what you see. And of course, not every corporation, but this is largely how it breaks. If you are working agency side, you're largely working with people up and down this whole left side of this graphic, right? And that's okay. But one thing you're always going to have to make sure as we grow, especially on agency sides, is, and the best agencies I work with always make sure they do this. They always make sure they know the currency, and they always make sure they know the center of gravity. And every org has a center of gravity as well. Like, what's the big deal? What's the big deal or big place that matters to them, or the big important team, to make sure that this group of stakeholders is happy? That's your center of gravity. The best agencies are always really good at understanding currency and understanding centers of gravity and understanding these roles and how to work them well so that they can serve their customers really well. In this case, the marketing teams inside these companies, or the business stakeholders. Of course, with the smaller companies you work with, these 10 roles you see on the left side of this graphic could be one person. I've been that one person before at that TV station in Seattle. I understand. So it can happen that way too. So this is kind of a helpful way of kind of understanding what kind of marketer you're working with, what they care about, or in the case of your own career planning, what kind of marketer do you want to be? And it's okay if this changes a bunch of times, because if you go back to my first slide about all the titles, you'll see that I kind of mixed it up. I did a little bit more product marketing. I did a little more communications. But I did a lot more go-to-market. And as I reflected at this stage of my life, I was like, you know what? I'm happy you're doing go-to-market. I'm a better expert in B2B marketing. That's where I like to sit. That's what I'm going to go do. And that's what I feel happiest about. So I realized that I've shared a lot of my own journey and a lot of, kind of how we've seen things in like title development and career development. I hope this has been a bit hopeful for you, but at the same time, this isn't about me. This is about you. So feel free to throw cameras on. It's lunchtime. Hope I've given you something to kind of think about as you've worked on a sandwich, or, whatever it is over these last 20 minutes or so. But I'm here for you. So I'm happy to take your questions. So I'll share one question that came in, I believe, ahead of this time today with us. One question that came in was, how do you kind of map to your career with keeping your key principles in mind? I think that's an incredibly important thing to do. We spend enough time at work so that, work should never feel like work. Work should feel like fun. Work should feel like something we enjoy doing. There's not always every part of every job you'll enjoy, but for the most part, it should be something you enjoy. And so for that matter, I think it always comes down to really understanding the roles and understanding asking the right questions in the interviews is always really key. I think that one thing that I was glad I had journalism training for is never ask a question because you want to ask a question. Always form your questions thinking of the answer you want to get, not the question you want to ask. So if you really want to understand the culture of an organization, because that really matters, you know, and of course it matters on a great level. You don't just ask, hey, you know, if Stephanie was interviewing me for a role, Stephanie, what's the culture like on the team? Tell me about it. Well, of course Stephanie's gonna say it's good. It's gonna be, but if you say, hey, could you tell me about certain kinds of could you tell me about how this team works together? Stephanie will probably give me an answer that will help us all understand what actually happens inside the team, and that's how you hear those little nuances. And so I'd like to just stress that is always the question asking time is always so important. And in that spirit, I see a couple of questions have popped in to our chat window, and I'll get with Emma's here first. Do you have any tips for figuring out what area of marketing you may find interesting before actually entering the job market? Emma, you're wrapping up your IMC degree now and came straight from undergrad, so you don't have that kind of previous experience. So I think, Emma, when we look at the currency slide, when we look at the kind of the, I think one thing I would suggest to you is as we look back on this slide and you look on the right side of this graphic, what do you want to spend your time driving towards, right? If you want to drive towards engagement and reach, and you're really excited that I reached all these people and these things are going on and this is amazing and we had this huge event and we'd had 200,000 views and this and that, awesome, go do that. But by contrast, though, if you're more about I was able to help this business grow and get more money, you know, what kind of gets you going? What's a fun thing to talk about for you? And sometimes on the go-to-market side, one thing I know I love, you know, going all the way back to my core values, I loved sports. What do you love about sports? It's a story and it's competitive. It's highly competitive. On the go-to-market side, I can be very competitive. I can be, you know what? I did a good job at my presentation today and I took away share from Apple. That's fun. That's fun for me because I'm competing against Apple, and Apple's some of the best marketers in the world. And that's a lot of fun to work to work in a competitive way. Compete is strong in the product marketing top side of this graphic, but it's not, you know, you're not competing as head to head, right? And so you're more like, I did this and they did that, and okay, you know, that's fine. But this is a little more on the ground, a little more on the field, so to speak. So Emma, that's what I would say is what, because you're going to spend time on this, you're going to spend the most time figuring out how to make the currency part happen. That's the part that is best. But as I noted, you can move up and down. You can move up and down all these roles and do a little of this and a little of that. I've done product marketing and storytelling, and once I got tired of hearing about things like, once I got tired of hearing about page views and Twitter followers or X followers as we call them now, I was like, you know what? I need to go do something else. It's I'm getting a little tired of this. I need to get back to, you know, the more competitive part of it. Hope that helped, but I'm happy to kind of expand some more. Jess asking, in my experience, how do I overcome silo culture between these specialized marketing teams at large companies? Oh boy, you're asking me a question right up my alley. Jess, that's exactly right. I mean, you know, I worked at ABC for 5 years. ABC is owned by Disney, at least right now it is. There's conversations about the network possibly being spun off. But that's a different story. And of course, I've worked at Microsoft 15 years. So you talk about silo culture, it absolutely happens. What I would say is this: relationships are incredibly important, incredibly important. And being able to know your colleagues and have connections into your stakeholder map, where you can talk very candidly and talk very, very comfortably with your colleagues is important. And being able to build those relationships when you first start getting into a role, you know, coming in and being vulnerable and asking questions. You know, if I go to work with Emma on something and I'm like, hey, Emma, it's great to be on the team. Could you help me think about how should I think about this or that? And I'd love to know your opinion on these things. Those I find are most helpful, because then people come to you too, and then you develop relationships with some of the newer people, because there's always new people coming in, just like when you were a new person. So be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to put yourself out there, especially when you first start, to better understand an organization, and you'll get those relationships. Why does that help for silo culture? You know, I've got a matter going on product marketing right now, and well, we've always got something going on. And I had a colleague on the phone and I'm like, hey, I feel like we're siloed on this. And I could, because I have that relationship, I could just pick up the phone and say that. I'm like, I feel like we've got an alignment issue here, and can we talk through it? Rather than, it allows you to kind of address the issue earlier And if you can address the issue when it happens, it's much better than letting that silo build up and build up and build up before you know it, you've got like not just silos, but two very tall, tall buildings. So I think the short answer is relationships, and really making sure you prioritize that. And when you work remotely, like I do, I work with people all over the world. That's difficult, but it's still important because you need to be able to make the time for that. And I'm just thinking through a couple of kind of silo breaking calls I need to have this afternoon. I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably talk to that person to make sure we don't have any, and make sure we got things running right. It's a journey. I hope that helped. So Stephanie asking, there's a funny joke about wearing multiple hats as marketers, but in more aspects of that, what recommendations do I have for someone who has worked in a role handling multiple things to go into a specialized role in marketing? So my suggestion for that, Stephanie, is if you are a generalist and you're going to become a specialist, make sure you're becoming a specialist in something you really enjoy. You really, really enjoy it. Because what I have found when people go from generalist to specialist is it was the one thing they spent some time on, and then they liked it sometime, and then they tried to make that sometime 45, 50 hours a week, and they went, oh my God, this is horrible. I can't, if I had to do this 50 hours a week, I'd lose my mind. We can't do that. We've got to be so that's why sometimes being a generalist is a little bit easier, is a lot more fun because you can be great at a lot of things, and that's perfectly fine. I personally, I prefer to be more generalist, and then I have a team running events and enablement. I have an enablement team that builds content. I have an enablement team that does trainings, and I have an events team that does events, and they are deep on events. They are deep on content construction and the finer points and all the things. And it's awesome. And I love watching them work. And if I had to do that kind of work, I've done that kind of work before full time. I don't think I could do it full time anymore. And that's why I'm kind of fun to watch how that kind of works around. That's why I kind of like being able to work with each of it. So short answer is, if you're gonna specialize in something you love and you could do all day long. I could do graphics all day long, to be honest with you, but I don't think I have the skills necessary. Specialists tend to get paid more money, says Jess. At least that's been my experience. Yes, specialists can make more money, but of course, if you're a specialist, if you've generalized and specialized as part of your career journey, it makes it easier to position yourself as leadership and say, you know what, I should be a director of marketing. I should be a head of marketing. I should be a VP of marketing. And then people go, yeah, you're right. You should, because you've done both, right? And of course, that's another thing on the pay scale. Of course, if you want to go into the leadership side, that's not for everybody either. Management's its own kind of fun too. I'm always fond of saying, going into leadership roles, you learn that it's, being a cowboy is not just about wearing the boots and the hat. Sometimes you got to go chase the calf at 2 a.m. that ran off, or you have to go shovel unpleasant things for shoveling, right? But that's part of the job, and that's part of the job nobody talks about. It's not just the boots and the hat, right? Emma asking a question about when it comes to resumes. Do you have a preference on the age-old debate about creative resumes versus the standard black Times New Roman font? It sometimes feels like so many hirers companies have different expectations for this industry, and it's hard to maintain both versions. How do I balance creativity and personality with practicality? Okay, first things first. Resumes, in my experience, should be as plain as humanly possible, because most of the time, your first resume read is happening by computer. It's happening by a computer ingest system that's reading your resume and evaluating if certain keywords popped up. It's not even seeing a human being. So if you're putting graphics on it or you're putting things on it, not a good idea, because the computer kind of chokes on that, and then you don't show up right, and somebody else ends up showing up higher in the rankings. So resumes should be kind of plain, as I see it. Now, where can you get creative? I showed you that slide a couple slides back where, I showed you this slide, right? And this slide is something that's part of a standard walking deck I do, right? And this walking deck is something I walk around. So when I actually go in for an interview, I'm coming into an interview and I have a slide deck and I hand it to them physically. Sometimes it's in a little binder or something nice, or, or I just share it in a call like this. And I've had, executives say to me, wow, no one's ever done that before. I'll say, yeah, well, the thing is, if you're asking me to market your multi-billion-dollar product, I better be able to show you I can market myself. And so that's what I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes pitching you on. And then I pitch them on myself. And that's where I can get creative, right? And I can talk about the journey and the thing I want to sell in that conversation. And then we have a really fun chat after that, because then they can see my marketing skills show up because I can market myself. And by the way, marketing yourself is one of the hardest products you'll ever market. I hate marketing myself. I always have to ask others help on this. So it's totally fine. I understand that. So yeah, long story short, and I see a ChatGPT question about resumes. I think that's going to be something I'll say in a second. And also how the slideware in the interview is something that can really help out too. So in talking with, okay, so Samantha asking, the digital landscape is changing quickly. Oh, you better believe it is. Yes, I firmly agree. Do I foresee any niche roles becoming more relevant and any that become irrelevant? For example, copywriting rules changing due to ChatGPT, et cetera. Yes. Short answer is yes. I mentioned I was in broadcasting a long time ago. I was a graphics person, right? I did live graphics on television. You want to know one big reason I left that? I left that because they automated the job. ABC tried to automate the job, and they put in an automated system for how news gets produced. And what was funny about that was they ended up having to hire 3 IT guys to replace me because the system breaks all the time. But that's a different story. And for those of you on the recording, it ended up working out fine. But this is the thing that happens, right? I think, I was about 25 when that happened, and I remember just being so. I remember being upset by it because I was like, "Oh, this is terrible. I worked so hard to be this, and now I got to go be something else." But it's part of the life. It's part of the life in a technology-based society. Jobs change, things change, roles change, things have to happen, and so you have to challenge yourself to change as well. And and so by being able to kind of go back to those core values and change yourself is important. So for example, am I going to use this place to name roles I don't think will be around in 5 years? No, because that's a great way to get yourself in a YouTube video 5 years from now going, wow, this guy totally called the future wrong. I think that the important thing to keep in mind about AI is more about, I'm going to have more of a skill-based conversation here. What skills are going to be important? I think the skills of knowing how to prompt AI is going to be important. Knowing how to prompt it to do the right thing is important. And that's something it doesn't quite do by itself. And I think that, at Microsoft, we call our product Copilot, right? That's our AI product. And it's exactly that, because it is not flying the plane, but it is next to you flying the plane and helping you fly the plane. And it's that helper, it's that assistant, right? So that's the best way to, and that's, by the way, the experience I've used Copilot in. I have it on my machine. I've used it already a bunch of times in the last month or so since we've got it. And I've found terrific value from it. I've had it write copy for me, for example, but I also see it and I go, that's not quite what I would have written, but that's not a bad idea, right? So I think there's still a place for that, but I think most importantly, think about skills and not necessarily roles. Think about what skills do you need to have and skills you need to develop. I needed to learn to develop to be a marketer, to be a better communicator. And that's how I got into what I did. So when you look at skills, being a good prompter of AI, understanding how the technology works and how to best drive it to the right place you want it to drive to, will help you add value to a business, to an agency, et cetera. And that is what's important, not necessarily roles coming in and going out, because roles are always evolving, by the way. If we do watch the presentation 5 years from now, we'll also see that. Jess noting, I found a leadership role is about managing people more than the things you love about marketing. Yes, but I also like working with people too. So I kind of find it really fun. I mean, I think that, one of my favorite quotes about leadership came from George Patton, the old World War II general, who said, never tell somebody how you want something done. Tell them what you want them done and let them surprise you with their ingenuity. And these are the sort of things that can really, those are the sort of things that excite me. I kind of have a vision for things. I go, hey, it'd be really cool if we had this. And then you see it and you're like, wow, this is cool. This is great, right? And so that's fun. Okay, let's see. I believe we kind of covered the resume questions. I'm going to drop in. Can I dive a little further into tips on marketing yourself, especially as remote work becomes more common and very competitive? Yeah, marketing yourself is a hard one, and there's a lot of different directions I can take this. First of all, I'll say this. There are some really excellent people in this WVU network who do really good social media and LinkedIn marketing, who are far better at it than I am, and far more knowledgeable and far more wonderful at it. So please be sure. I know, Stephanie, I know you engage these folks all the time on personal branding. Please go to one of their workshops. That's the first thing I'll say. They are outstanding. I've learned a lot from them. And I'm glad we have such a good community here. So let me give you, Stephanie, a plug for the community and help you bring more people to these workshops, because there is some excellent stuff that happens in those workshops. So that's one pivot. That's one bit to think about. I think another one to think about is also, you know, I, I think that marketing yourself is hard when you think about it as I need to market myself. You need to instead think, I need to market a product called Stephanie Moore. That's what I would do, right? I would say, what are the qualities of Stephanie Moore? How do they stand out in the market? And so you almost need to take a professional view of yourself and step back a little bit and go, okay, well, what is my value proposition? What is the value I bring to the table? When it was me, for example, in my process, I talked about the things that matter to me, but I also talk about how, the three kind of value propositions among the value propositions I have is, I like to create clarity, I like to bring people together, and I like to drive results. Those are the things I'm passionate about doing. And by the way, those are also things I have a history with. So then I can pull up relevant examples of creating clarity and about how I was able to take really complex technical products and make them really simple to understand. So, for example, when I go to do a Microsoft Windows presentation that I do, yes, I can talk about all the technical sides of it, and that's fine, but I also talk about the time it gives you back, right? If this product can give you 10 minutes of your day back because of the way it's built and because it works better, well, what is 10 minutes of every employee's day worth to you as a business? If you have 1,000 employees, you get 10 minutes back a day. That's a lot. What would you do with all those minutes? It's a gift. It's the gift of time. You're buying the gift of time now. And you see, all I did in that case was I took a very complex thing and I created clarity with it. And I could show examples of that. So I do that when I do kind of market myself that way. When we talk about things like, bringing people together, I can bring up examples of that working globally, right? And or when I was working more locally, I'll bring examples of that, people from other parts of the country, or being able to talk about it in terms of, the last thing is driving revenue and being able to be bottom line oriented and saying every step we took was towards getting market share, was towards getting revenue, and this was the outcome it got. When I traveled to this place, it cost us a couple $1,000 to travel, but then we ended up getting X amount of dollars back. And what's our return on investment? Being really cognizant of that. That hits business leaders pretty hard. People like seeing that because then they can go, okay, I get you. You understand what I care about. You understand my currency, right? And I talked about currency earlier. Understand the currency of who you're talking to. And if you can put yourself as someone who can give them that currency, that's a very, very powerful way to market yourself. Stephanie, I see you're still muted, so I'll just briefly say what I'm actually doing here in Toronto. I am seeing customers, and of all things, I'm attending a Toronto Raptors NBA basketball game. So I still work in sports, but just I'm sitting in a different part of the building. Not at the scorer's table. I'm sitting in a suite. So a little bit different.
Well, thank you, Joe. It looks like no one else has any other questions. I will process the recording and send it out to everyone. So everyone who also registered. So thank you and hope this helped everyone.
Indeed. And so, yeah, thanks everybody. Stephanie, to you and the team at WVU, deeply appreciate the chance to do this. Glad to have spent some time with you today, and I hope this is helpful. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or through the usual channels around here. Always happy to connect with those here in the WVU community, and wishing you all a wonderful day.